What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
Join the stars of the Ancient Aliens TV show, Eric Von Däniken, as he returns to Manchester after an amazing response to his last presentation. David Childress will guide you through the evidence left behind. Mike Barrow will take you to other worlds, where Nick Pope will present the real X-Files. Paula Harris will share incredible testimonies. It's time to believe and raise consciousness. Join like-minded souls on Saturday, June 23rd, 2018 for Awakening. What do you believe?
Hi guys, and welcome to another edition of the Kevin Moore Show. Now on today's show I'm about to be joined by my guest Kerry Cassidy of Project Camelot. Now since its inception, Project Camelot has become a leader in the area of whistleblower testimony by providing filmed interviews shot guerrilla style on location with key witnesses and researchers from around the world. Kerry has travelled to remote corners of the world and revealed secrets in areas previously only known to a select few from secret societies and those with high-level security clearances in secret governments. Enjoy my interview with Kerry. Well, let me just welcome you to the show. So, Kerry Cassidy, thank you so much for joining us in LA.
Sure.
It's great to have you on. Okay. And thank you for driving down here as well. Now, you're going to be in England when this goes out in July. You've got a conference taking place there?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's my Awaken Aware High Elms UFO Academy conference, and it's at the High Elms Manor, and that's in Watford, the UK, and so it'll be fun. You know, I do it every year now, and it's a very small, intimate gathering. High Elms Manor is a beautiful manor house. You may know of it. And, you know, it's one of those old manor houses in England and has grounds and so on. And we have only room for around, 116 people. So, so what happens is it's small, it's intimate, and it's wonderful because people can, congregate and meet each other. And they spend all day Saturday and all day Sunday there. And I have a great lineup of speakers, and usually around 5 or 6 every day. So it's really quite packed. And And we all sort of congregate, we all eat lunch together, people meet everybody. It's very easy to interact with the speakers, you know, they're lounging around during lunch hour and this and that. So, and then we also do sort of a UFO sort of sighting thing at night, if people are up for it in the sky. England, of course, can be very, you know, cloudy and all that, but generally, you know, you can see something, and so we did that. And yeah, it's fun. It's great. It's actually, the word of mouth on it is very good, and so we do advertise it. But of course, it's tiny. The reason I'm able to do it is simply because, I don't know if you know about putting on conferences, but I put on larger conferences years ago here in LA.
All right, yeah.
And came up against a problem getting people to buy tickets to come in person and travel to get there, and so on and so forth. So, you know, we also got attacked and had all kinds of things happen. Anyone who financially wanted to come in with me to be my partner would always get interfered with. And ultimately, I had to put those conferences on my credit card. And then I'd be sort of on pins and needles for like the last 6 months leading up to the conference as to whether I'd break even. And it became too much. I couldn't deal with it, you know. And back in those days, it was more difficult to get people to come in person to conferences. I know that Contact in the Desert gets zillions. It looks like, but they have a major sort of advertising budget and whatever it is. I mean, they really sort of inundate you with ads and so on. And of course, we never had that. So I've found that doing small conferences is better for me to actually get the thing done without risking my credit. And so one of the ways I started doing this was I started traveling around Europe. I did it with Sean David Morton, and I invited him to come with me, and we did a small group of conferences around Europe. And these small venues with, you know, around 100, 150 people seem to be the kind of ideal European little venue without spending, because the biggest expense when you do a conference is the cost of the venue.
Yeah.
And that, in California, it goes into the thousands. So, you know, you're really talking, when you want to get a lot of people in one place, you know, for a weekend conference, it's a massive expense.
And why England?
Well, that gets into the whole Project Camelot, I don't know, aura, if you want to call it that, history. You know, as far as I'm concerned, we have a real link up with the actual, you know, King Arthur and Camelot. And I have a history going back to that, and I believe that karmic history, whatever you want to call it, that sort of magic around the round table, comes forward to Project Camelot at this time and was there when Bill Ryan and I created the whole project.
And we'll get into that as well. And the jaguar symbol that you see, that's symbolic as well. There was of something connected with yourself, is it?
Well, it's actually, the song is about a jaguar, and that just happened to be a poem song that I'd written years before and recorded with my ex-husband.
That's the one, yeah.
And that was just sort of a serendipity. Strangely enough, that when in the song the lyrics relate to the jaguar, which is the South American symbol of going into other worlds, the doorway to other worlds. So that's what I wrote that song about. So it became sort of apropos for our project, and we just didn't have any music for the logo kind of thing. And we'd gone to Africa to film you know, African, we just spent sort of, see, Bill grew up in Africa as a young child, so he learned how to take you on safari, and so we didn't have to pay all the money you pay to go on safari in Africa. So whenever we wanted to take a break from Camelot in the first couple years, we would go to take a safari. But it would be on our own. And it was kind of fun and it was very fun, and it was very sometimes a little dangerous when you're only two people and you get,
Right.
your car, your wheel breaks and you're in the middle of the Serengeti or wherever, and it can be quite dangerous at night when, lions are approaching and this sort of thing. So, it's kind of fun and dangerous. But anyway, we started doing that, and I filmed a young cheetah who made a kill. So he was running really fast and everything. And, we didn't have great, National Geographic motion picture cameras or anything. We just had this consumer grade camcorder. But I filmed, the cheetah doing a kill, and that became the sort of the logo, and we decided to make the cheetah. So it's a cheetah that is our logo, the Project Camelot logo that's become quite well known at this point. And the music under the logo was the Jaguar music that I composed many years before.
So just going back before you met Bill, what was your past life career?
My past life career. That's an interesting way of putting it. Well, my career was working in Hollywood, actually. I had been trying to produce sci-fi movies and as an independent producer. And that's also a very difficult road to go down. And as a woman, it's also an old boys network, always has been, the movie business. And I was born and grew up in Northern California, and so I was brought up with a more independent spirit. And that didn't work with the whole sort of old boys network, we promote you if you kiss our ass kind of attitude that goes on in Hollywood. So I didn't get promoted. I didn't get, moved into being able to produce on my own. So I actually just decided to do it myself. So I became an independent producer. I tried to package these projects, and I got them, I spent 20 years in Hollywood working kind of my way up the chain. And towards the end, I did have contacts, in like Ridley Scott's company and Steven Spielberg's company through the story people, not through those people, but through their story, the people who handled development, and was able to get projects in there. So, but then I would strike out because I didn't have what you call a track record. So I kept going up against this glass ceiling. It was very frustrating, and eventually I just, my mother passed away, left me a small inheritance, and I took that money and I bought a consumer grade camcorder and decided I would go out and make my own UFO documentary. And didn't really know what I was doing, but I wanted to get the truth out. I knew that. And I attended a couple Hollywood conferences that were taking place with speakers like Rich Dolan and, Jim Mars.
They were at it for years, weren't they?
They were on the circuit for a long time. And so I did sort of an unusual thing. I put the camera in front of their face and I would ask them questions, and I was very successful at it. I don't know why, I just had a knack for it. I had studied journalism in college, so I had a journalism background.
Same here,
I was trained in journalism. So, and then I studied filmmaking, and I'd gone to film school at UCLA, short fiction film program. I was a writer, director, producer. So, I had a background in the film industry. That was my whole passion and everything. So I taught myself editing and filmmaking, and then, that's how Project Camelot came about when I met Bill. We teamed up and put our skill sets together, really.
Who was the first one you interviewed on Project Camelot?
Well, as it happens, when I look back, I didn't realize it, but I'd already sort of started Camelot before I met Bill Ryan, because he was one of my first interviews. But I also interviewed Robert Salas, who's a well-known whistleblower about the Minot, the missile base, actually in Washington, in Washington State, where the UFOs came in and shut down the missiles and so on.
Yes.
So he lives actually in not that far from here in LA. I'm not going to say where. And he's a fascinating man. He's an ex-military
I've got to
witness.
interview him, man. I'd love to.
Yeah, he's a fascinating guy. And so he was more or less one of my first interviews, actually. Wow. And the other one was Bill Hamilton, who was also sort of on the circuit here, and he wrote a book with called Project Aquarius that dealt with Dan Burish, and he was dealing with Dan Burish. So it's through him that we got connected to interview Dan Burish. And
I remember that guy, yes.
yeah, Bill Hamilton is a very, very smart guy and very, good speaker, and he was on the UFO circuit for a while. He's completely off the circuit now. He actually went back to work for the Military-Industrial Dark Side Conference. I don't know what he's really doing now, but he did go back to work for them. It kind of was his dream to work for them. So, because he was highly technical and very interested in that aspect. So he was my second interview, and then I did I was doing interviews at these conferences, as I said, in Hollywood. So I interviewed Jim Mars at one conference. Jim Mars, Rich Dolan, Stephen Bassett, and a couple other people. I can't remember exactly who. And I did make a short documentary.
You did, and where did that end up?
On Project Camelot.
So you went to the event. You never really booked time to see them. You just met them there and said, "Look."
No, I just during the break, I went. They were selling their books at a table, and I went up to them with, because I was trained as an actress. Also,
Right.
I studied acting years before in New York City.
That takes some balls, I tell you. That really does.
Well, yeah, I guess because I had that personality, and they were willing to talk to me. I don't know, it just worked. So I did that, and then I didn't even know how famous they were, really. I just, I thought it would be a lark to go to UFO conferences. I didn't think about it like a big deal, because when you work and live in Hollywood, the UFO scene and someone who is famous in that is small potatoes compared to the Hollywood star scene.
Of course.
And I've been sort of living and working in that sort of other milieu. So anyway, so then Bill was actually somebody I decided to interview at the Laughlin conference. Mm-hmm. And that was in, so I did all that in, say, October, November of 2005. And then in 2006, in February, I interviewed Bill. And we made a real good connection on a friendship level, really.
Yeah.
And I interviewed him, and I tell this story, but he had just gotten done being interviewed by a whole film crew with all the lights and cameras and stuff.
And this was Project Serpo?
That was when he represented Project Serpo, and he became the webmaster. Basically, that's all he was. He just collated the information. But because there was a lot of, it was what you call a DIA release of information. So it's orchestrated. It's not, some of it is completely false. It's a whole mixture. And what it is depicting is actually the Close Encounters, the end of Close Encounters movie. You see Richard Dreyfuss suiting up, and he's going to be part of an alien-human exchange program,
That's
basically.
Right. Yeah.
That was the lead on, and the sort of the I guess you might say, the teaser, the release of a small bit of information telling the public that could be real, right? That's what they do. They leak things in movies. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's coupled with a lot of untruth.
That's
but
right,
usually they leak you,
So real information mixed with false information,
Yeah.
misinformation, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's going on constantly now. It's even, that was just when they were gearing up back in those days.
That's prevalent now, that is, I would say.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was what Bill was representing. He wasn't anybody who had any real information, so I wasn't that enthusiastic about interviewing him. But I figured he became kind of the flavor of the month because he was the only spokesperson, the only face you could put with this DIA release of information. So that was under the name of Anonymous. And it was all written material. There was, so there was no human face attached. And so Bill became kind of the quasi-spokesperson, and he became quite knowledgeable about the project. And he also started getting approached by a lot of intelligence agents who wanted to chat him up and kind of scope him out and so on. Anyway, so I interviewed him, and my interview was very good, and it went very well. And we hit it off he had sort of a good attitude. I liked his attitude at the time. And he was very intelligent, well-spoken. He didn't have a lot of ego, or didn't demonstrate a lot of ego around, because it wasn't his material.
And I'd met him back in 2008, and I thought, what a nice guy.
Yeah.
He was very approachable.
And he always came across as a very nice guy. Other things happened later on, but at any rate, you know, we had a nice connection. So we went to dinner, we got to know each other a bit, and then we just said, let's keep in touch. So then like I said, I had this small inheritance, and I decided I would go to take some of that money and go to Egypt. Wow. Because William Henry and Jordan Maxwell were going to Egypt, leading a tour. And I'd always wanted to go to Egypt, and I'd been there once already with my mother, so I decided I'd want to go back. And they were going to discover sort of the clues of Atlantis, the signs of Atlantis in Egypt. And I was always resonated with the whole Atlantis story. So I went with them, and then since I had just met Bill, and he was in England, it wasn't that hard to go from, you know, Egypt to England. And Bill said he'd show me the power places, Tintagel, and, you know, former home of King Arthur.
There's so many power places in England, isn't
there?
Yeah,
I mean, you know, Avebury, Stonehenge. Yeah. So I was dying to see all of that.
Yeah.
And so that was great to have a guide that would do all that. And plus, you know, we had become friends. So that's really how it started. And we went to the home of Tintagel. I had past life recall of the time of Arthur. And Bill didn't have that, but I actually, Bill had been told by some psychics that he might be the reincarnation of Arthur, or he was told by an Illuminati guy that he was the last in the Arthur bloodline. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but he did seem to have some psychics would pick this up, and this is before we ever met or anything. And I didn't know about that, but I tripped into that information. So I told him that. He denied it, but he said some people had said that about him. And so eventually what we decided at Tintagel, sort of with this amazing energy going on there, which is really extraordinary. If you've ever been to Tintagel. No,
and I live in the place.
Oh my God!
No, it's terrible.
Yeah, no, it's actually remarkable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's where we came up literally with the name Project Camelot, because I don't know, we both decided, okay, let's put our skill sets together. He had a whistleblower who had approached him, and he was telling me about him, and I was telling him that I'd interviewed these other people, and we basically said, hey, let's make a project and get the truth out.
Yeah. I remember watching you in the early years when I was at university. And you know, it was amazing stuff that you were bringing out. I mean, let's just bring that forward now. Well, actually, let's just go back a bit there. When did you and Bill call it a day that you were going to go your separate ways and working separately?
So it was interesting. We only lasted. You know, it's weird now being kind of fast forward to 12 and a half years later, right?
Yeah.
So he and I were actually in quite good unison, and we started as friends. We had a short temporary time as lovers, and that didn't work out, so we ended up back as friends. But then about 2 years into it, we started to diverge in our viewpoints, and up to then we'd always agreed in sort of almost a magical way on, let's interview this guy next, or that woman, or whoever it was. You know, we really were very connected, and we didn't have arguments about who we would interview. But what happened was you know, obviously we were separated, and he was on his own, and he met a woman who started to whisper to him that he didn't need me, that he would be the star, that he could be the main interviewer. That's what I was told. And then on top of it, there was an outside influence, an agent that got involved with the situation, and we tried to patch things up towards the end of I guess the third year, because the third year was very rocky. Mm-hmm. You know, ups and downs and all kinds of craziness going on, and we were not getting along. And so we got a couple people to try to mediate between us at the end, and it didn't work out. And I wanted to go in one direction, he wanted to go in another. I wanted to become more well-known and more popular, and really reach more people. That's the reason you want to get popular, is to get your message out. And he was becoming more and more reclusive. He was kind of into the prepper mentality, and which I wasn't at all, And back in those days, it seems strange now because people every year they come up with a new reason to be a prepper, what you call a prepper, right? Which means preparing for like the end of the world, or the sort of some diabolical thing that's going to happen to humanity. Now, they're always plotting diabolical things, but a lot of the things never came to pass, right? This was back in 2006, 2007, 2008. So
it's not very much being in present moment then.
Well, it's kind of just a view of reality that influences you. So it's a bit reclusive. You can appreciate how a prepper is a bit of more reclusive view of life.
Yeah.
He ended up going to Ecuador and disappearing into the, he was always into sort of he was one of those, a caver, and like I said, he could lead you on safari. I mean, he's a very talented guy in that realm,
So where did that, so are you guys in a better place now? Are you talking?
No, I have no contact with him, but he's also, like I said, retreated to the wilds of Ecuador, and I don't know, what he's up to really, but I know he kept Avalon. So what happened was, Project Camelot, basically, I took it over, and he took Avalon, which we had just created not too long ago prior to that, which was sort of a forum, but it was a forum that was supposed to have its focus as sort of preparing for something and also for people to get connected. And he really liked that whole forum sort of format, I guess you call. And I wasn't really a big fan of forums. I thought there was a lot of backbiting and, sort of horrible things go on between people there. And I just didn't have time for it. And I was always having to edit and do a lot of the sort of heavy lifting with Camelot.
Yes.
Bill started to pick up the pieces and learn. He actually learned editing. I helped him learn editing, and he learned, to operate the camera. So he came along with those skill sets. To the time when we were separated, he was quite good at those things.
Yeah.
He's a quick study and all that. But, the reality was that we did have kind of a division of labor in Camelot. I was the lead interviewer, having the acting background and the basic journalism background and so on. And he was kind of the one who kept up the correspondence with people. Mm-hmm. He was very sort of into writing. He liked to write a lot. Like he would write long emails back and forth with people. So the forum was a natural outlet for him. So it went over to him at that point.
Well, I hope there's a time, when you two, do bump into each other again, and you can, see things from a different perspective, and you can be friends at least.
Well, we have actually, interacted since those, during these 12 years. I mean, there have been reasons why we had to get in touch with each other for various reasons.
Sure.
So we, it's not like I don't hate him at all or anything like that. I actually, I have a lot of love for him. Actually, he was a good friend and a good partner. He did some things that I didn't appreciate, that I didn't think were honorable, I think you could say. But ultimately, people in this sector go through an incredible learning experience.
Oh, they do.
And it's a real, trial by fire, I guess you might say, for your personality. And it's not easy to keep it together. I've been heavily attacked, and actually, strangely, during the time of Camelot in the early days, everyone would attack me because they didn't like the fact that I would, be such an aggressive interviewer, that I wasn't a lay down, that I wasn't just complimenting my guest and shutting up and all this stuff. But I had this, it came from my acting sort of philosophy, which was based on the Sanford Meisner, I don't know if you know anything about acting, but it's a school of acting. It's a lot like what you call the method acting, right?
Yeah.
And it goes back to Stanislavski, that method, and it's all based on truth in the moment. and being completely truthful, and that's what makes you a good actor. So it's kind of a dichotomy. You would think an actor is doing something what people think is fake or acting, but real acting is acting in truth. So I had learned to be a director, and I applied my own acting training to my interviews so that I was interested in getting an interactive performance between me and the subject, which I still do now. So I'm not interested in just sitting there like a board and saying, oh, lovely, wonderful, whatever. And I get a really good testimony as a consequence. And I've also learned I am an intuitive since I was a child, so I can tell when someone's lying, and I can tell when they're obfuscating and they're going off into a program. Because a lot of people, you ask them a question, they have a program running in their head, and all they do is sort of start to go in this, it's like a groove in a record. They've gone down it before, so they say the same thing with every interview they ever do.
What program is that mainly? Is that MyLab kind of influence, or?
Well, I mean, yeah, you could call it MK Ultra. It goes back to programming humans. I mean, the television, advertising, and programming. I mean, the programming goes back, to, well, way before the time of Egypt and Atlantis. But if you want to really focus, then you could say that the Nazis were refining programming. And that gets into when you're dealing. In Camelot, our specialty was witnesses who worked in above black projects.
And I never understood how you got those people, because I don't think I've ever had I've only interviewed whistleblowers or witnesses after they've already told their story. I never had anybody come to me.
Oh, right.
No.
Well, I don't know, we got a reputation. There was this magic around Camelot from the early days. So I think it goes back to the days of Arthur. I believe we reconstituted the round table, what you call the round table, and I believe a lot of our witnesses were originally knights of the round table.
And so they felt resonance with you.
And there was a natural. I mean, Bob Dean is one of them. He's an obvious, one that you can point to.
That makes a lot of sense then to why they came to you then.
Yeah, and when, interestingly enough, is some of these people had been on the circuit. I mean, before I interviewed Bob Dean, he'd been on the circuit for like 10 years or something. But I guess we had a special resonance. And so there's a dynamic, there's a drama, if you will, to the interviews.
Yeah.
And people felt it. They felt this, and people are compelled to tell me the truth. I know I'm very dangerous. I mean, people, now the military actually
do you think that's because
stops people from talking to me?
Because it's mostly a male-dominated bloody field. So being a woman, that sort of opens them up a little bit to feeling a bit safer.
Maybe.
Yeah.
It can work both ways, though,
Yes.
because it's an old boys club type thing, even in the UFO, or it was in the UFO. I don't think it's so much now, I mean, journalists like Paola Harris had broken the ground before me, as well as Linda Moulton Howe. And, I'm sure there'll be others. There's tons of people doing what I do now.
Do you connect with those other two, Paula and Linda? Are you in alignment anywhere, or...?
I interviewed Linda recently. I admire both of them. I think that they've done good work.
Yes.
So that you could call them an inspiration. But I didn't know about them when I was doing Camelot until as things moved along.
Paula's feisty. I like Paula. She don't care, does she?
And but I can tell you that there was early days kind of some professional jealousy coming from both of them. That I'm not going to reveal much here about that, but just to say that, so we know certain things that they did behind the scenes to try to prevent us from becoming successful. But they also did the opposite, I know Paola wrote about us in a positive way in her book and so on like that.
Yeah.
But I have no issue with either of them at this point. And obviously they broke ground and have, they're still out there working.
They have. I mean, you look at some of the greats that have disappeared recently. I was thinking of Art Bell just before you came.
Yeah.
He's passed away now. There's been some great people that started the field up. I mean, if it wasn't for Art Bell, I don't think I would have gone to university. I started listening to Alex Jones and Art Bell. I don't listen to Alex Jones anymore for myself. It just doesn't resonate at all. I think if Alex Jones was to do his type of show from a spiritual perspective, it would be much more needed than where it is right now. Just my personal opinion,
Right.
To me, it's a lot of fear porn, I call it, and it's attractive because it's fear porn. But it really, where is the solution? I always say to myself, in any conspiracy theories, it's yes, it's a way to get in there. But you speak to someone that's heavily addicted to telling you all the conspiracies, and you say, yeah, but what's the solution, bruv? What's the solution? And they don't have it. For me, it's always been consciousness.
Sure.
You know. And you mentioned a little bit about that as well, that you were intuitive. I'm guessing you've had some experiences when you were younger, abductions.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah, same here.
I did, absolutely. I mean, I was abducted, I'm sure, when I was young. I had a repetitive dream, nightmare, you might call it. So what happens is, I also, to clarify, is that I didn't come into the UFO in the nuts and bolts side, which is where a lot of ufology was in the early days. Even during the early days of Camelot, they were still more interested in the nuts and bolts of the craft than they were of the occupants who drove them, which I always thought was weird. And I'm just not, I can do technical, obviously. I trained myself in filmmaking, but I don't revel in it. I like, more mystical things. So my expertise was actually in the area of studying the occult, Eastern philosophy. I taught myself to meditate at a young age. I connected all my chakras. I had massive Kundalini, activation and samadhi experiences, and I still do. And, I was very much on the consciousness track before I ever got to Hollywood.
Okay.
And that's why I wanted to make sci-fi movies, because for the same reason I got into Camelot, really. I wanted to reveal the truth about the nature of reality, and that we were in multiple realities, because I was aware of those other realities when I was a child. So that's what was my motivation for wanting to make those movies and go in those directions.
That's right, we are in multiple realities. I've said this to you off air, I've interviewed almost 70 channelers now, and they all talk about, multi-dimensional reality. Every time I say to them, why are we talking about this still? And they're like, because you need to know. It's it's your process of awakening so that you can choose the reality that you wish to choose.
Yes.
And we're all choosing our own realities. I mean, Seth said that we create our reality from the Seth material. That was
right. I read the Seth material when I was like 11 or 12 years old.
Everyone's read it.
Have they? Well, I don't know, but that's good to hear. I was a big influence, Jane Roberts.
I was with the Seth boys, with Rick Stack and Barry Giles, just a few days ago, with Barry, that were there with Jane Roberts in the class. It's fascinating.
Right.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it's, and there's a wealth of information there. So, at the age of 11 or 12, that's pretty advanced stuff,
God, yeah.
So, and my mother had some occult books and that I found that were sort of put away in a corner of the garage, and I started reading them. I was very fascinated by it. So I never was into kind of practicing it per se. It was more that I wanted to know about it. So I wanted to know about everything. The dark and the light. And that continues today. I don't wall things off.
No.
I really embrace all of it, and I have a tremendous open mind. And I think maybe in part because I sort of started off as a heavily intuitive child who was kind of, you want to call it, living in my own world for a long time, and being aware, of other beings, ghosts, and things, magical things happening. And I had a grandfather who kind of encouraged that side of me, and I just, that fascinated me. So I really wanted to explore that. Anything that had a mystery to it, I was always fascinated by that. So when I do an interview, when I do what I do, even now, and someone else was talking to me about this, saying, in a sense, what I really do is I collect the clues, and I'm still on the trail of the mystery of life, collecting the clues. And I'm like, in a sense, a defense lawyer in a way. Every interview, every person that I talk to, on or off the record, their testimony comes in to either support or change the trail direction.
There's all different truths.
There is, but there is a through line, and I'm a firm believer in the truth, you know, and in a through line that connects all of us, you know, and that connects life on planet Earth. And I'm not one of those people who sort of said, oh, the truth is relative, and, you know, you're living in your own bubble. You do live in your own bubble to a degree, but we have a shared reality that's very powerful. And then you have to think of the layers of that. So our consciousness, the consciousness of the ETs, of the plants and the animals, and, you know, of the discarnate beings, and, you know, and all the way back to Godhead. So you may have a bubble at some point along that trajectory, but it doesn't, you're not isolated. And the bubble can be very, you know, can be punctured, can be interfered with massively. And that's where you get programming, and you get takeover, and you get interference, and so on.
Yeah, because, you know, for me, right, anything that we do without the consciousness side there, what's the point? It doesn't make any sense. But then I guess when you do your interviews, though, are you really bringing much talk about consciousness into those, or are you just letting them tell their story?
Well, see, to me, I don't have these buckets, you might call it. So consciousness is not a separate bucket. It is everywhere, and it's involved with everything. So, you know, it's the same thing as talking about God. I feel the same way about God. Consciousness and God are, in a sense, you know, if you want to call it the force, you want to call it the creator, you want to call it whatever you want to call it. It's this essence of who we are, is consciousness, is, in essence, you know, the what you call the ether. It's all connected. So to me, when I'm doing an interview, of course consciousness is involved. You can't walk away from it. It's you know, it's integral to the process. But you don't have to talk about it as consciousness necessarily to know that it's there, or to even perceive it through the experiences. You know, it's really that you're going to get the picture of consciousness and how unbelievably deep it goes, and how there are no rules and barriers.
See, I think the thing is with me, if I was going to interview someone that was a whistleblower, I'd maybe add at the end of it, well, spiritually now, where are you at? Now you've gone through all this, right? How have you changed as a person? What as it if everything you've been through has not changed you as a person, then what are we doing?
Well, you see, I think that comes out in the interview anyway. In other words, what happens is, if I ask the right questions and get them to reveal, they're not just revealing their story, but they're revealing who they are within their story and why they acted a certain way within the story. And they're revealing their heart and their soul, and in the degree of truth they're willing to convey. Because consciousness and sort of the search for truth are really sort of unbelievably linked. Yeah. And so that's where you see the demonstration of soul and really where they are spiritually. But I don't ask them directly, where are you spiritually? It's a fair question, but it's also, it's kind of one of those questions that, you know, platitudes are sort of abound, and people will say anything, but that's not going to reveal who they are, in my view. You know, you can say, oh, I'm all about love and oneness and whatever, but it's bullshit, you know. And
it depends how they're applying that to their life, though, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's demonstrated in who they are, and it comes through the camera, you know, it really does. It comes through that and through the interaction.
But you could, I mean, obviously I've met a lot of channelers who channel ET presence or consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, their higher self from in the future, when like Darryl Anka, that's Bashar in the future or something, his future self. And so it's gone from, the UFO community is in a right divide right now anyway, and we'll talk about that, but there's a lot more, you know, from nuts and bolts to actually consciousness-based UFO research going on now, especially with the channelers as well.
Well, eventually ufology had to sort of wake up and get into all of that. They had to, you know, and even now, I mean, I push those boundaries much farther than most people.
Yeah.
Because I got into, okay, well, who are the ETs? And I've been following that trail for a long time now. When you get into ETs, those are other consciousnesses. And how they interact with human consciousness is how it plays out here on Earth. Are they positive? Are they negative? Are they trying to influence us? How? So and so. Has to do with their development, their level of consciousness. So I'm not a person who believes that the ET is naturally of higher consciousness because they have higher technology. Those two don't work together. They don't, even here on Earth, as above, so below is so true. And the fact of the matter is that the more technological we become, it's questionable whether our morality, our sense of good, right and wrong, etc.
That is true.
Is demonstrated by our development technologically.
But
and the same with the ETs, and you have to hold them to the same test.
But then I always remember reading the Seth material, and it said that we live in a safe, loving universe, or a safe universe. Others would argue with that in this field that no, we do not live in a safe universe. So is that Seth's reality, or is that the person's reality that says no, we don't?
Lately I've been saying, there's a saying that Richard Hoagland made famous. He didn't make it up, but it was told to him. And it was, the lie is different at every level. The truth is different at every level as well. And when you're dealing with different levels, meaning 3D, 4D, 5D, 6D, and so on, this earth, this living experience that we go through as a soul, looks different from the perspective. You can just imagine if you're on a mountaintop and you look down, everything looks different on planet Earth. You have a different perspective of it. So if you were to describe it, you would describe it differently than if you were a little dog running along the ground, and you seldom look up. If you look at dogs, they seldom look at the sky. They almost always looking down. Not all the dogs, but most dogs. And so they're focused on the here and now, the earth in front of them. So that's their perspective. It doesn't mean that those other levels don't also exist. They're there, they're just not paying attention. So humans are the same way. And, it's really a matter of becoming aware of all those levels. Now, let me say something about channeling, since obviously you're very into that. I think, it was the Wingmakers guy who basically said that, I don't know if you know wingmakers.com and the whole story that goes behind it. James is the guy who kind of originated that. And the story goes that, in essence, he was on the run from a black project, and he created this multimedia website, and it became kind of a cult following, and it has different renditions. It's still on the internet. And I became quite involved with them. And James said in an interview with me and in his other material, basically that there's a channeling matrix. Okay, so we're talking about matrices. Just like you saw the movie The Matrix, there's a matrix here on Earth. There is a channeling matrix. You could think of it as a river, going around the Earth, and that in essence, channelers they're basically fishing in that river constantly, which means a lot of it is recycled information coming in. And it's a lot of it, if you really start examining it, step back, you'll see a lot of them are saying the same things. And, there's obviously you're going to have some authenticity in there, but you really have to watch it. And there's also a lot of, now, of course, you've got MK Ultra type technology, mind control that the military is involved in. They use that. They use the overlay and the BS involved with channeling to mislead people. So people that think they're actually talking to whoever they're talking to, Jesus, direct connection to God, Ashtar command, whatever their flavor is, they may or may not be actually getting into those people. And go back to Edgar Cayce. There's evidence that some of the Cayce material was actually channeled in from the dark side, and that it was there to mislead humanity. And some of it was true, and some of it was false.
I think, though, if you spoke to... I've sat down with Kevin Tadeusz, the head of the ARE. Of course, he will say that's not true. Yeah, of course he would do. But I don't think... For me, that's not true. About Cayce, being sat there with 10,000 readings behind me of his work, right? and the effect that had on people, and that still people can now take the Casey readings and apply some of those to their lives for what they're suffering from.
Yeah, we're not disagreeing with the fact that there's truth.
I just couldn't go.
It's just there is some dark side channeling in there. Actually had to do with the earth changes and other things that have never happened.
True, but then was he picking up on other probable realities?
No, grays.
Yeah.
You see, the gray ETs are putting down an earth
it's
change
funny you say that,
scenario.
because I met Carl Molliston, who said that 99.9% of channelers aren't channeling what they think they're channeling. They're channeling entities that will go to a level to make it look loving, and it's helpful, but they won't go above any high level because they don't want them to go any higher. Don't want us to go any higher. So I've heard the whole gamut of all of this, right? I couldn't say about Casey, right? But that's your opinion, right? And that's okay.
It doesn't matter.
No. Definitely. Have I seen channels that are channeling the higher self and they think they're channeling something else? Yes, of course I have. Yeah. Sure. My whole point of saying about the channeling is really, my whole thing for doing the documentary, it's called They Call Us Channelers, is because pointing the finger back and use it to channel yourself. All information, any answer that you're looking for lies within.
Sure.
And we don't want to hear that sometimes, right? If we just used our own intuition, we'd find that the universe lies within as well.
Right.
Yeah. So if you want to find out if something's true or not, as you do, use your intuition. Go with your gut feeling.
Right. But it's important to understand that whatever we're getting, let me say that we're all channeler. In my view, there's no separation.
No separation.
We're all in constant communication.
Yeah.
Okay.
With our higher self. Yeah.
With our higher self, but also with entities, with discarnate and incarnate entities, with what you call ghosts, with which and also ETs. A lot of people think that they need to go on a sighting to see a UFO, to see and talk to an ET. Yeah. Look, they can teleport, they can connect with your consciousness from anywhere. Consciousness has no rules, and the fact of the matter is that we're all connected. This is the soup that we live in. Yeah. And so in my view, in a sense, any time throughout history, like an author or an artist would say, I was inspired, something came through me and gave me this information and made me paint this way. It's God, it's spirit, it's, Jesus, it's, whoever. This is, in essence, channeling. We're bringing this stuff in through us all the time.
All the time, yeah.
And let me tell you something. When I'm doing interviews, I am channeling.
Of course.
Because I am bringing through and being influenced by various ETs that are in the vicinity, that are interested in what's happening, and that have a vested interest in such. So in a positive way, they will be here, and in a negative way, they will be here. And they will try to influence the proceedings.
Do you think sometimes the questions you ask interviewers are actually, there's something else wanting it to ask for you? There's something getting you to ask that question.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the most obvious examples was when I was interviewing Aaron McCullum, and I got this information come through that, I must ask him. I think it was about dolphins, as I remember. It was something very clear. It was something that was actually went to the heart of who he was and what his experience was. Right. And I didn't know anything about, he had never mentioned that to me. I didn't know anything consciously about that. Obviously, I was fed that information. I was fed it during the interview. And in fact, if you look at me, if you actually study me like through the progress of the various interviews, you're actually going to see me change. And it's, I don't like it, okay, in some ways, because in essence, there will be so many entities trying to kind of get into the show, and there will be, I don't talk about it, but I can see etheric beings, I can see, grays and light beings and so on. So I'll see them pass in front of the camera. Sometimes they'll walk around me and the interviewer, viewee, when I'm doing the interview. They will interfere. They mess with the cameras. They mess with the sound if they don't like the proceedings, etc. And
I told you thank you for saying what you just said there, yeah, because you never talked about it just in that way before, right? But
Okay.
But that's what I do as well. When I've been doing these interviews with the channelers, no paper, no questions. I've just let it come through and
Right.
just sometimes it's a lot me, but sometimes it's that, whoa, okay, wherever that's coming from. And I don't say, oh, I think this is another question coming in here from, Ashtar
from the
Kamal.
peanut gallery over here.
Yeah. No, yeah. but I've been channeling this group called The One, and I think I'm working with them, and I think it's a loving group. It feels very loving. And so, yeah, I understand what you're saying. And whether it's a group or whether it's just a higher self, and I don't want to say I'm powerful enough that it's my higher self and I've got all that kind of access to that.
I fully, believe in and am connected. I have sort of a very good through line with my higher self. Yeah. And I also feel, direct to source. I don't have an issue there. I never have. It was, I think, sort of, I don't know, it would be silly to call it the luck of the draw. I guess it was hard work through my lifetimes, whatever it was. But the fact is, since I was a child, I had this sense. I've had people tell me this, when I was younger, saying, it's weird, but when I'm with you, I feel like I'm connected to this source, to God, whatever. Now, I'm not trying to, please don't think this is like an ego thing.
No, we've all got that connection.
It just, it's sort of, how do you say, it's natural. It comes to me naturally.
It's like a funnel, right? Your greater part of your soul is at the top, and it comes down to this small pipe. Your pipe it's just widening sometimes to allow that greater part of you through at moments when you need it.
All of us, are doing this. Yeah. And it's valuable. It has been an incredible help to me in my progress.
We're going to get onto darker forces just a little bit. I just want to touch upon it, but just one thing I want to say to you now. When I look at your work now after having this interview, I think what you're doing is you're covering these subjects like you do, but actually this is for some people that watch you, the masses that watch you, their only way to get into spirituality is through whistleblowers and UFO contact subjects, because any other way they wouldn't have an interest in the soul and anything else like that. So when you touch upon subjects like that and you keep the nuts and bolts there in the whistleblower interviews, it always leads back to consciousness. Do you not think there's a bigger reason for what you're doing? It's not just about what you think it is.
Well, I think it is about what I think it is, which is about, consciousness, which is a spiritual, path, which is, what I think Project Camelot was about all those years ago, the Round Table and the Holy Grail and, whatever you want to call it. So it's revealing the truth and the matrix that we live in. Actually, if you don't learn that, you're not going to learn to rise above it. So it's vital information that has been barred from humanity. So humanity's spiritual progress has been halted because they don't know the truth about the nature of who they are. Bill and I were told very early on Camelot that the biggest secret is who we are, humans. Okay, who we are, what we are, and where we're going. So this is the biggest secret. And so Camelot's drive, my drive, is to reveal the truth of who we are.
Is that a
and
soul
that is a spiritual. We are Godhead. We are God.
Right. Yeah.
So that is you can't get away from it.
So
it's spiritual.
Could you say that's a soul having a human experience as one way of saying it, maybe?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, and I say that a lot. So, there's no doubt about it. That's what we are. But humans, in the matrix that we live in this 3D going into 4D reality, have gotten they fell in love with the image of reality rather than reality itself, if you want to call it that. So it's the Maya, and they tend to think that's who we are, and that this thing is solid and real. When even a physicist will tell you that nothing in this room around us is actually as solid as we think it is.
That's right.
That all of those molecules, it's made up of those things we call them molecules, call them, particae, in the case of Ashiana Dean, who's, someone who I think is quite accurate in a lot of the information she gets through her sources. She does not call it channeling, she calls it downloads, but call it what you will. The fact is that this reality is very malleable. And the more we move into 4D, the more we're going to discover that. In fact, it's being discovered now that, the reality of what we think is solid isn't solid. The grays can walk through walls, sure, but other beings can as well, and we can, actually.
Yeah.
And the men who stare at goats, we're all about that. It's a misnomer to think that a whistleblower who's talking about their dealings in black projects isn't on a spiritual quest. They are. And in fact, what I say is, a lot of whistleblowers, the nature of their quest has been to go into the dark side, to fully immerse themselves there, to learn everything there is to learn, and to bring it back over into the light to reveal the truth. That's an incredibly spiritual, mission. And so, it's important to understand that's a mission, it's a sacrifice that they make. They put their lives on the line, they put, their families' lives on the line, their loved ones, regardless of the relationship. And, I can tell you, Bob Dean's daughter committed suicide.
Yeah.
Why do you think that happened? Clifford Stone, I think his son was killed in a motorcycle accident. These are top whistleblowers.
Well, let me ask you, what have you had to sacrifice to do what you're doing now? Because you must have had to make some major sacrifices. Well,
everything. But I made that decision. It was a soul decision early on. Even when I was a child, I was, that's why I decided to teach myself to raise the Kundalini and to, join all the chakras. I basically wanted to reach, enlightenment at a young age because I felt that it was vital, and I still do, that humanity do that. And that, it's not a destination. So it's important to understand that. It's a journey. Yeah. And enlightenment is ever expanding. There's really no end to it, because becoming enlightened is, in essence, becoming completely aware of, in essence, God, or whatever you want to call the force, in essence.
Which is what I would so agree with you there. Yeah, you come here, you're sort of under a veil. That's just a human word for it, a forget-me-not, and then you're reawakening to who you truly could be. And I think life wants us to reawaken now. This seems to be a very special key time for some reason, for so many things.
Yes.
Now, when, with the ET subject as well, when you see these crafts blip in and blip out, that to me is a sign of that they're not from this dimension. They're going from another parallel universes.
Sure.
They're not from this universe, some of them.
Yes, and, keep in mind, though, that the military, the basically secret space program, has built craft with that capability, and that they can can jump into other, go interstellar, go into other dimensions. They are going interdimensional. It's a fact. Now, I have so much testimony along these lines, both on the record and off the record, that to me, also with my own sort of ability to, if you want to call it, intuit the truth, find where the truth resonates and where it does not. This information is so known to me. And, I would cite...
But where's discernment in that? Sorry to butt in there. I just want to say, where does discernment come into any of the ones that you've interviewed?
The what?
Discernment. Where's the word discernment come in?
Oh, discernment. Oh, well, of course. Discernment is everything. So, that's what humans are learning. In other words, if you can't discern the truth, you're not going to get it, right? So learning discernment, learning, what's positive, what's negative, what's in the gray area, because it's important to realize is that some people on this sort of trajectory tend to get into a real black and white judgmental space, okay? And they tend to forget about the gray areas, and yet life is full of gray areas, as is consciousness. So it's not enough to say, oh, that's a positive being and that's a negative being. Even the negative being is working to protect their race and their families.
True.
You know what I'm saying?
True, but then how do you know if someone's coming to you and all the interviews you've done have really deceived you, and actually maybe they've just regurgitated something and it's just none of it's true except the stuff they regurgitated from someone else?
I have to say that the people I choose to interview have grains of truth in what they're saying. They may have a lot of falsehood in there as well, but you can bet they have some truth or I wouldn't bother with them. Now, the fact is, do they know which is which? Have they been so programmed they've forgotten? Or, in many ways, we're like messengers coming from, a deep, dark forest into the light and then delivering our message of what we saw in the deep, dark forest, which is, the other side, so to speak. So it's in sharing that you start to realize, okay, well, there may be some truth to this. And then you gather all the testimonies and you start to corroborate and see what matches. Where is something completely outlandish? Where does it sort of sticks out? And you start to realize that you can actually, I mean, see, this is why I was so intent on doing video interviews. You know, I did radio for a while, but I didn't really think it was adequate. I think, you know, this task requires, and, you know, of course, the best of all places is to see one in person, right? We still have that human thing where you can really grok in person if someone's lying to your face or not, in most cases. Now, on video, seeing somebody's face, and that's why I spend a lot of time, you know, with Camelot on the witness's face, you know, with that interaction. I would, as I told you before this, you know, I didn't spend time trying to make myself look good cosmetically, unfortunately. And I wouldn't have the best lighting and all of that because I didn't give a shit about that. I really wanted the witness and their truth to shine forth. And so, you know, I'm facilitating that. That was really my labor of love. You know, funny enough, it was a special radio talk show host who actually said to me, you know, you need to be on the camera. It didn't even occur to me in the very early days. All I wanted to do was just film from behind the camera. I didn't think of putting myself on the camera.
No, because people resonate with you.
Yeah, then I realized that, oh, well, yes, you know, I'm the messenger, so it matters that they want to see me. And I got it, you know, I got, especially with the acting background, and, you know, so then I was fine with it. But it's you know, it's a very weird dynamic that goes on in the whole interview thing and in revealing the truth. But the truth is spiritual. There is no dividing line, you know, that's all I can tell you. I can say that, you know, this is the interesting thing. All of the whistleblowers that ever, assuming they truly work for the dark side and they truly worked, you know, in secret capacities, whether it be for black projects or as a dark magician or whatever it was, then they were chosen not just because of their scientific bent of mind, whatever, or their ability to, you know, wield a weapon well and physically adept and so on and so forth. They were because of their psychic ability, because of their spiritual level of, you know, you don't get psychic ability without a certain development of spirituality.
Now, I'm going to back you up here 100% and say that's true what you're saying, I believe. Right? No, I'm not doubting anything you've said, right? But no, because I've had firsthand with what you've said. I went to go see Colonel Corso's son in Florida just 2 weeks ago, and he's retired now, and he wanted to do an interview. I tried years with this man to get an interview, He's got nothing to lose now, right? Like he told me. We did an interview from the spiritual perspective of his dad's work, which no one's done before. And what didn't come out in any of the interviews before they did was that actually this man was actually different to the rest of people. This man was highly intuitive. His whole family was intuitive. There was UFO abduction experiences within the family and everything.
Always,
right?
Always.
You know, so for people that don't know this was the man that did the book The Day After to Roswell. You know, where he talked to me about this craft that was gifted to us to look like a crash. Where half of it landed in 47, the other half landed 10 years later in Corona. And I'd never heard the spiritual side of his story. My laptop's over there with the interview on. So yes, you're right. I would say there's something about these people.
Absolutely.
But that never comes out normally.
Well, you got to understand when the secret space program is recruiting people, this is what they're looking for. And it's in spades. They are looking for psychic ability. Look, psychic ability, being a precog, makes you better at sports. It makes you, you know, better at everything. You have to understand, it's like having an ace in your back pocket as coming into this reality. You can manipulate reality better if you have that ace in your pocket. If your senses and your you know, because we all have these talents, but in different measure. So if you're dulled down, if you're unaware, if you aren't aware that you have an ace in your back pocket, so to speak, which is, you know, beyond the six senses, then you aren't going to be of use to them. You're not going to be a good soldier if you don't know psychically intuitively, you can't see that guy coming around the corner. You don't know if that's friend or foe. You've got to be able to discern in the moment, in the split second, is it going to be friend or foe? You're going to be useless on the battlefield otherwise.
Well, you know, when I had my interview with Corey Good recently, we only stuck on the spiritual side. We just talked about the spiritual side of his work, nothing else, right? And we just kept it to that. Now, I found Corey to be a very nice person, right? You know, I mean, what I found about Corey, and I said this to him as well, he's just on a mission right now, and he just wants to get this out, and you know. But obviously, you may have a different take on Corey, or you may.
Well, I would rather not talk about him, you know, because I don't want to single out individuals, you know, with certain things. He and I did not have a good beginning in our relationship.
Didn't you oust him?
No.
Okay, right. Okay, but that's what's out there,
the beginning
isn't
of the
it?
lies. Yeah. No, but you know, this is the kind of thing. So I'd rather not go there. All I can say is, you know, I wish him the best. I hope that, you know, he will come into more clarity as he goes on his journey. What can I say?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. But then, how many other people are there in that situation?
Well, everyone is, to a certain degree, you know, piercing the fog of illusion around themselves. And some of these people, the people that come forward as, you know, witnesses who have worked for the military, who have been recruited because of their abilities, are also programmed. So somewhere along the line, with MK Ultra, My Lab type thing.
Corey talks about that he had.
Absolutely, he's not going to deny it. So you know, that's a really important part. You have to understand that it doesn't matter who I'm interviewing. If they've worked, even if they haven't worked for the dark side, or they don't know that they have, they basically are going to be mind controlled to a degree. It's part and parcel of the way it works.
Well, I did say to Corey at the end of my last question was in this consciousness interview, I said, what if the whole experience you're having was not what it was? So in many years to come, if you were to look back, what if this is not what you think it is? Would you be surprised? And he said no.
Look, we know they're avian beings, so that much is true, you know. Take it where you went from there. You know, you have to kind of piece it together. It doesn't, in a certain sense, you know, maybe people hate me for saying this, it doesn't matter if it's true in a certain way.
No, that's right.
What matters is to understand what the person is trying to get across in the context of the way they see it.
Exactly. You know, the funny thing was, right, being sat with him and being with him and actually, I actually understood the man a little bit intuitively. No, I really did, and I know I wasn't expected to say that. It's, you know, it's not because I got the interview. It was because I understood. See, when people track their crap, you know, from comments from me and everything, or anyone else in this field, right? You know, they armchair critics and all that kind of stuff. Unless you meet the people and know a little bit about it, and know that there's a much bigger picture taking place, your lens is like that. Do you know what I mean? And you don't see the bigger picture.
Well, it's the value of an interview. I mean, look, when we started out in Project Camelot, we were very rare that we did this with a video camera. Nobody hardly had ever done it. So, you know, we traveled the world literally with that camera. Now, that's the value of it, you know, and it's actually, you know, ballooned. It's grown gigantically. Everyone and their brother are now interviewers with YouTube channels. And eventually it's bleeding. It's going to bleed through. I mean, Sean Stone is Hollywood. He came to this subject matter. You know, there are other people who are, you know, you mentioned somebody, I guess you said Avatar, who was doing interviews. I mean, in other words, it's actually, we're starting to realize, humanity is starting to realize that we are the witnesses, that we are the truth tellers, okay? And consequently, all of us can sit on both sides of that equation. We can either be the interviewer, you know, and prompt the other person to reveal what they know, what they've found out, or they could be the one being interviewed, like I'm sitting on the opposite chair here.
Well, I hope we're having a conversation rather than you feel that you're being interviewed.
Yes, but call it what you will, is what I'm talking about is happening. It's a dialogue.
Yes.
And we as humans, I think keeping that dialogue going, keeping that dialogue open. That's one of the biggest strengths of the internet that made that possible.
Well, and I've got to say thank you for doing this. You didn't have to come here to do this interview, right? But I really do appreciate you doing this, right?
Sure.
And that shows your transparency as well, with, you know, because I mean, you've got a much bigger channel than mine, right? You don't need this, right? But obviously there's a resonance to want to do it, yeah? And to
I speak wherever I can, whatever I'm
nice
asked.
Of you to do that.
You know, I don't turn people down.
Yeah.
The only thing that would prevent me is finance. You know, like if I couldn't afford to get wherever it was. So yeah, you know, I'm you know, I've me and other people have made me available to contact in the desert, for example, but they refuse to have me.
Why?
You know, I am banned
Why?
from most places. Coast to Coast won't have me on.
No, why?
They actually admitted it, you know, and then when I was on, they knocked me off.
Why?
Because I got on there accidentally. Because I'm a big threat. That's what even Coast to Coast said. She's too much competition. They, you know, the bottom line is they'll interview, for example, David Wilcock talking about my witnesses that we brought forward in Camelot, going on for hours, but they won't talk to us.
Are you still good friends with David?
Yeah.
Yeah, you and David are okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, you know, what I'm saying is you have to understand, it's
But what? That seems so strange.
It's an
though.
element because I go places no one dares to go. That's a fact.
But then are you glad that you never sold out to another company? Are you glad you kept your content all with yourself and you've built your own brand up?
Yeah, obviously. You know, why not? I mean, I want more independence out there. I want people to you know, to sort of stand up and stand for what they believe in and have the guts to go down these roads. I know my colleagues in the early days of Camelot, they would not back us, you know, publicly. Even people that were some sort of friends and supporters behind the scene. I'm talking about colleagues that are out in the and well known. They won't go in these, and they wouldn't go for years into the area of ETs. And then all of a sudden they started to reveal in the last, I don't know, 2 to 3 years, I'd say. I mean, the denials that they're, you have to go back in their history and listen to the denials. I can tell you, when I went to investigate Atlantis in Egypt with Jordan Maxwell and William Henry, I wasn't even in Camelot then. I didn't even know I was going to be in Camelot. So this is prior Camelot. I had my video camcorder. I'd already bought that, and I was starting to do this thing. So I asked Jordan Maxwell, we were at one of the temples along the Nile, and I said, you know, I want to talk to you, Jordan. I want to know if you'll talk to me about ETs. And he said, and I want to film you. And he said, okay, yes, I will, but you have to never ever release this interview. He said, if I talk about ETs, it's going to destroy my career. So you have to promise me that you'll never release this. And I said, okay, yes, I will. And I never did. Even recently, I think I asked him or whatever. Now he wouldn't care because he came out in a major interview years later, and he talked about ETs, you know, very openly with me. So back then, it was a stigma to talk about, you know, experiencing, contact, ETs, you name it. They didn't want to go there. They didn't want to be associated. Reptilians, I mean, certain people wouldn't use the word. They wanted to kill anybody who would say that they were talking to, you know, investigating reptilians.
But my time with you right now, right, you seem like, you know, you're not trying to divide anything. You know, whenever we've spoken about somebody, it's more about unity and just, you know, at least being fair.
But Camelot was always about unity from the very beginning.
But then what happened with Dark Journalist and Bill Ryan and all that stuff with Corey Good? I mean, that was a complete divide campaign.
Yeah, but Bill was not in Camelot when he did that.
No, he was with Avalon, sorry.
And that's part of the reason Bill and I were no longer working together. I mean, you know, everyone has their journey. Bill, to some degree, decided that he wanted to become judge and jury.
He did,
okay,
didn't he?
And I basically, I drew the line. I said, that's not what our mission is.
No,
our mission is not to judge our witnesses. I may ask them the hard questions, but in the end, I want the audience to decide. I'm not going to tell them what to think.
I mean, that's a person. I mean, I met Corey in person. I'm not trying to. I mean, I could feel the amount of attacks that had come on this man, right? And that what he had to take personally. Yeah. So why couldn't have someone just picked up the phone and say, "Hey, can we speak to Corey and do an interview?"
Oh, look, I was supposed to do a conference with David and Corey. They called it off. Because you got to understand where I'm at. I'm not about the personal shit. I don't care. Now if somebody goes out and badmouths me, I probably won't have them on my show, which is now what Corey has done. So he probably burned that bridge, let's say.
But that's not a bridge you couldn't build again.
No, it's not impossible.
No.
Look, there are, anything is possible, but even sort of, there's a level, you kind of, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, however you want to call it. You can't be, I'm not about sort of being a lay down. I'm not about, it's important to realize you can forgive, but you don't have to forget. Forgetting is the problem. You see, humans have to remember, but remember and be able to have a large enough sort of awakening where you can see it in context and forgive the soul.
But on a soul level, none of this matters.
But it does.
It doesn't. It
absolutely does.
But when I go back home and the game's over, I'm going to be like, oh, nice little holiday down there. Oh, how you doing, all the people that I didn't like? Yeah, good, mate. I'm all right. Let's forgive and forget. Come on, let's move on.
Maybe so. You'll be there eventually. But the fact is, be there now. Be here now.
Because that's what we've got. That's right.
Be in that.
Yeah.
Channel your own higher self to the degree that you can forgive here and now, and that's where I'm at. So if somebody wants to talk to me sort of in a sort of authentic way, I'm going to deal with them, whatever happens in the future.
Sure.
And I myself, I'm like one of the most hated people on the internet. When it comes to this sector, you would think, because no, you can ask people. It's all over my YouTube. I had to stop the comments because not only were they attacking my witnesses, but they would attack me in the most violent, verbal ways.
No need for any of that.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And these are normal people. These are
supposedly. But of course there's lots of trolls and a lot of, mind control also getting thrown into that. You can't kind of divide that.
Let me ask you this then. If you ever found that one of the people that you've been interviewing, because actually when you came into me, you mentioned a few things which I'm not going to talk about right now, but if you found out that someone that you had supported had actually done something quite grotesque towards someone else, and this had actually been proven that this actually took place, you would then have a different viewpoint on that person, wouldn't you?
Sure. But, you got to understand, one thing that goes on with Camelot is a lot of the people don't realize is that I'm dealing with people like that all the time. You see, whistleblowers are not angels.
No, they're
they were working on the dark side, some for 40 years of their life. Some of them were involved in building weapons that killed all kinds of people, like 9/11 and you name it. They were under orders. They were doing whatever the dark side told them to do. And some of them still are. And some of the people that are out on the sector, that are my colleagues, if you want to call them that, right now are working for the dark side, even though they're out, acting like they're spreading the light and the truth. They are steering it in certain ways that is actually, in my view, leaving humanity vulnerable.
And where does this dark side come from? Because it's not an actual physical thing, is it? Are these entity attachments to people?
Sure. It's all kinds of, there's a positive yin and yang quality to the universe.
If it wasn't, we wouldn't be here. How would we know what love was if we didn't know what hate was sometimes?
Well, that's the way it's put. Below the lines, going up quite high in the dimensions, if you want to call it that, and densities, there's still a lot of yin-yang going through all of it. So, for sure, you need the one. You need a balance. A lot of people think that they're coming for a golden age, but that's not actually accurate.
That was my next question, actually.
We're actually, what we're trying to do here is bring the balance back to center. because Earth right now is leaning towards the negative.
Yes, it is.
And so it's all about bringing it to center. It's not about everything is going to be hearts and flowers.
I
It's
wouldn't want it
simply
to be.
not
I don't know
gonna
if I'd want it to be. I don't know
It'd
if I
be
came
boring.
here for. Yeah, but did we come here to be like that?
Right.
You know, if I'm going
No
to
challenge
smoke a bit of
whatsoever.
marijuana now and then, I'll do something. I don't want to not have to do something because it's not spiritual. Everything's spiritual, but you are right. The balance. Dead right there. Do you
Right.
think in your lifetime you'll see that balance, and do you think you'll see disclosure, or are you the disclosure?
Well, we are the
We are the
disclosure,
disclosure, yeah.
absolutely, no doubt about that. And, you know, we work hard at it, for
And that
God's
includes
sake.
everyone that all the names that we've mentioned as well in this interview.
Yeah,
and
people
more.
are, you know, out there trying to get to the truth of all of it. There's no doubt about it. And it's a wonderful, beautiful thing that's happening, this sort of awakening on the planet. Will we get there in my lifetime? You know, maybe not, you know, but so what? I mean, it's the journey that matters, you know, in the end.
I've changed, you know, I had said this to people about your material. I'm going to be honest here. I said no holds bar interview. I had said sometimes to people that, Kerry Cassidy, your material is so fear porn sometimes. It's all fearful, right?
Really?
I did. I'm going to be honest, right? Because
Yeah.
because for me, it's like, you know, very much, you know, love and light, consciousness kind of stuff. But you know what? I take that back totally. I take it back totally. I'm allowed to change my mind. I'm okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Your stuff. I see why they're coming to you, and I see what you're doing, and I totally understand where you're coming from right now. So this is an example for people who don't understand and say it from a distance sometimes, to actually get to fucking know someone first, right? Before you say things, right? Or at least if you're going to go on your intuition, just give them. Don't be so judgy. That's my problem sometimes. I can be very judgy. So. No, I see where you're coming from now. We're still okay, right?
You know, it's not a surprise to me. It's all right. You know,
Yeah.
I get that a lot of people don't understand, let's say, my deeper mission. They didn't know what I was really about. That's from the very beginning. I think it's more clear now if you do take the time to watch me, and more, I'm able to kind of, I guess, translate in a certain sense all of the interviews I've done and start to have people look at it kind of from a different perspective, so that they start to understand, you know, why do you want to learn about the dark side? You know, and it's so important to becoming a light warrior, in my view.
I think you're
and,
right.
And that you actually see, you must understand, if you don't know it and you don't understand it, you are doomed to repeat it and to actually work for the dark side. And this is what I'm trying to prevent. A lot of so-called light workers are actually working for the dark and don't know it. And this is
And
really
I would
prevalent.
never have agreed with you on that before, but having done this interview and done this journey across the world, that was made very apparent to me, many times by different channelers.
Yeah, no, it's rampant, and in fact, they're used for it because they don't know how to defend themselves. They don't know enough about the subjects and what they're up against to be able to fight as a good warrior should, you know. And they can be deceived so easily, and you know, taken in. And all they're really looking for is comfort food and pablum and, you know, light and flowers, because they've had a very dark life. You know, a lot of them come from abusive families, you know, terrible stuff, MK Ultra victims, you name it. And so all they want to do is talk about the good stuff and the light. And so, you know what? The light is strong enough. You don't have to talk about it.
Yeah.
What you do need to do is reveal where the light is not and bring the light to the dark.
But
that's what's important.
But some of your work where you've talked about, or you've talked to people, not yourself, but you've interviewed people where they've talked about, you know, child abductions, child sacrifices and stuff.
Sure.
I find that really difficult to believe it's true. I don't want to believe
really?
it's true.
Yeah.
I don't want to believe that's going on. Child sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that is deep shit, that is, if that was.
But see,
but you would say it is.
You need to understand the bloodlines. You need, again, who are we? Who is this vehicle that we call a human? What is this human? You know, because we're spirit, soul first, and then in a material reality.
Yeah.
But we've chosen to come into this vehicle. So understand, how is this vehicle made? What is it made of? What are its tendencies? And what you will find out is that some of the early, when they first helped create this vessel for us to occupy, for spirit to occupy, in essence.
Yes.
It didn't have a reptilian brain, okay? And it wouldn't defend itself, consequently. So consequently, there are dark reptilians out there and dark beings.
I believe that.
And so they were attacked and they didn't live. Their experiment didn't survive. So they had to imbibe it with this other, they had to ask a group of negative beings to come in and contribute to this genome.
Well, yeah.
And then the question is, no, it's an important point. It's because I know so many people who don't understand this, and of course it's not out in the mainstream. But if you don't go into the reptilian side of humanity, you're not going to understand. You cannot put a pedophile, Satanist in jail, and a blood-sucking whatever. You're not going to cure them by putting them in jail. It's in their DNA. It's in the reptilian part of them that they haven't been able to. They've done battle with themselves and lost. Okay, against their reptilian side. Now, if you don't bring understanding to them, and you don't bring understanding to the people who are dealing with these pedophiles, first of all, it's important to know that it doesn't matter how many pedophiles the Trump administration supposedly arrests behind the scenes, they're not going to get the top dark magicians. They're just not. Okay, because the system protects them, and they've orchestrated it for millennia to do so. So don't be naive and think that you're going to solve the problem by arresting 100 pedophiles in your local community or whatever. It's rampant through the human race on the planet at this time, and many people that are dark magicians, that have lots of reptilian DNA, or other mantis beings used to eat humans. I mean, there are other beings that are very negative towards humans, spider beings, etc. If you don't understand what we're made up of, and that we're actually doing battle, the light against the dark, constantly, not only within ourselves, but on the outside, in this sort of material world. And so that's the dilemma here. That's the battle that's going on. So throwing people in jail is not going to solve the problem.
But I would want that person not near my daughter, I think, or son.
I get it. But you need a deeper understanding.
That's what you're saying. Yeah. We need that deeper understanding to get to the root cause.
Yeah. Then you can devise a cure. You
Yes.
can start to teach them balance.
Yeah.
It's interesting because people don't think that, a lot of times they don't seem to wrap into their consciousness that these ETs, some of them negative, are also growing and learning.
Oh, yeah.
And that they can transform from the dark to the light.
Well, maybe that's why they're so attractive, because maybe they got stuck, some of them, where they are, and
Right.
that our growth is their growth is our growth, just like it is on the spiritual side.
Sure.
We always think that when we, for example, channel something, that it's like, oh my God, but actually they're looking the same and down and saying, oh my God, to us.
Right.
It's a two-way building. It's a two-way evolution. It's not just one way.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is the thing that it's very fascinating. Like Simon Parkes and Mark Richards. If you listen to my interviews with them, Simon is basically talking about what are called the mantids or the mantis beings, and saying that they are coming over to the light, wanting to work with humanity towards an ascension pathway. Consequently, they're not trying to necessarily have power over us constantly, eat us, damage us, etc. Same with some of the reptilian races. In the case of Mark Richards, he's constantly talking about the raptor beings. The raptors, having gone through a certain amount of evolution since the time of the dinosaurs, broke off from that, went off on their own, actually left this part of the galaxy. And all of this is in the Mark Richards interviews. And he's in constant contact with the raptors, and they are now working, according to him, with our military and protecting humanity.
How is he in contact in jail? So he's channeling that information.
Yeah, he's,
receiving that.
If you want to call it channeling, whatever you want to call it, downloading. Yeah. He's, look, humans can go through portals. Right here, we could create a portal and go through it.
We're not saying Mark Richards didn't commit a crime here, because he
probably didn't.
Well, okay.
He's absolutely framed.
I had someone email me that said, "Why did you have that Mark Richards guy on?" Because I had his wife on years ago.
She's a lovely person.
Yeah, years ago. He's like, "You don't know one thing." He's like, I was in that town when those murders took place. This guy is guilty of those murders, and I didn't reply to him because it wasn't.
First of all, he's supposed to be the mastermind, so how does that person know he's guilty?
I don't. Yeah, this was just a comment that an email. Sorry, that was emailed to me.
Yeah, but this is also a person who easily can be influenced. He could be taken over.
I don't know
he could
who
be
this guy-
working for the dark side.
exactly.
He could be a CIA plant.
No idea who he was. Yeah.
And again, he could be a light worker that they've taken over and is now working for the dark side. I mean, these people are so prevalent. You can think what you want. Obviously, I've got 8 interviews, and I've sat this close to him.
Oh, you have, right? Yeah.
For hours and hours
and
in prison.
You used your intuition on that, yeah.
And don't take my word for it. I wish I could get him on camera, but the prison won't allow it.
No, you're not allowed.
Now you've got to ask yourself: this man is been in prison well over 30 years. He's in his 60s. He has failing health. He didn't commit the murders. He supposedly masterminded it.
Let's put that.
Why isn't he on parole at this point in his life?
Well, I would say put all that.
He
to
was
one
a
side.
military man. He still is a military man. In fact, he's regarded as such by the prison guards and the prison itself.
Right.
He was basically treated as the Navy captain that he is and was trained to be.
And I would say
in prison now.
Put all that to one side. Let's hear the information that he's talking about now. That's what I would say. I only mention that because
it's fine. But I'm just saying, this is the thing: is that all you need is. Tomorrow someone will come along and say, Kerry Cassidy does this and and then you're left with a dilemma. Do you believe? I've known her since they could lie through their teeth,
And yet, because they've said it, you can't say nothing against it. Or if you do,
well, even if
you do, it means nothing because they've said it.
It's what do you want to do? This is discernment. This is the sort of land we live in, and I say to people. Do you expect truth to be delivered on a silver platter? If that was the case, what would be the point?
Some people do.
I understand
and
that.
Some people just, as soon as you've said something, as soon as someone's come along and said a truth, people latch onto that person as though they're a new type of God. That's what happens with prophets, don't it, and stuff like that. And they won't let go, and there's no discernment in the person, or there's no what's my truth in all this? It's people. Sometimes they want to be told what to do. They want to be, they don't want to take responsibility sometimes. But that sounds quite negative, right? Which it does, but it's true in a sense.
Well, it's absolutely true. I mean, people. That's part of the learning journey, right?
Of course it is. Yeah.
To learn to take responsibility for who you are and for what you do and what you say.
What would you say then, bringing this to an end right now, thank you so much for your time, what would you say is the important message of your work?
How important it is to reveal the truth behind the matrix and behind all the different levels and start to really understand who we are as spirit and soul, occupying a material existence, occupying this vessel, which is a human vessel, which is a composite of at least 12, the DNA of at least 12 ET races, in my view, whatever you wish. And then we become the 13th. There's also that hidden element of where humanity came from originally, the spirit soul, the sort of key ET race that maybe humanoids that were related to, and so on. So the message is just, to find out the truth about everything here on the planet, and that's what we're put here to do, to share your truth. I encourage people that, have been silent for years. They don't realize that living a lie is not helping their kids. You may think, oh, my kid will live because I don't tell the truth, but they won't really live, That's why it's so important. It's actually that revealing the truth is in many ways more important than life, especially if you understand that we're eternal beings anyway. So that if you kill me, I'm just coming back and, I'm going to be a worse threat next time. It's that sort of thing.
Well, thank you, Kerry, for what you do. Thank you for bringing your light to the world and, trying to help us awaken in the way that you're doing. It's so important for everyone that's connected with you and for everyone that comes across your work and the lives that you touch, which you'll never quite know how many you've touched, but you know, judging on your figures and everything else, I think you've touched quite a few lives. So just thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.